Welcome back to Artivism on YourTown television program and our second segment with a continuing dialogue with my good friend Patricia Hamilton. Welcome, Patricia. It's nice to have you back.
Thank you, King. It's great to be here.
Well, we got to know each other over your book, and I'll hold it up right now, Life in Pacific Grove, California. And for those of you in the area, you know, this is 500 pages of stories written by Pacific Grovers about their love of Pacific Grove. And Patricia can talk about it better than I can, but it's in the library and local bookstore. You can also get it on Amazon. So I just want to say we met over this project as it was forming. And I was fortunate enough to you asked me to write a story for it, and I did. But this book is such a success, actually, and I'd love for you to talk about that and how it's been received by the public and what that experience has been like for you.
Well, it's just been fabulous from the day it was launched. Butterfly Days.
Yes.
We had a big crowd at Chautauqua Hall. The mayor was there to introduce the book, and me and my family, and Senator Bill Monning came, and he's written the preface in the book. So the Chautauqua Hall was filled, and we noticed that people that were lining up outside actually to get in. It was the biggest book sale anybody's ever seen. It was wall to wall for a couple of hours. Well, actually more than that. And they were selling well over at the library as well. So it was just really amazed me and overwhelmed me. Yes. So it was fabulous. And then since then, everywhere I go, people are thanking me. I get lots of thank yous in the emails, and people tell me how, you know, what a gem it is. And it's got 10 5-star reviews on Amazon so far.
That's fabulous.
So I'm just so happy that everybody's so happy with it, and it's making people so happy.
Well, it is a wonderful thing because we put art together and we put it forward, and then it kind of takes its own life.
Yes.
And so, but it also doesn't surprise me because this book is just got so many wonderful stories in it, and art as well. Keith Larson's art that you collaborated with him to illustrate many of the stories in the book.
Yeah. The artwork actually came out of my access to it. I was giving free memoir writing classes through the library. And after the first class, I said, these stories are so great, they should be in a book, because people share their stories.
Okay.
And it's the sharing that is really the magic of a memoir class. And Keith said, I'll do the illustrations, because I said I couldn't do a book without some good illustrations. So he was a trooper right to the end.
Yes, and did a number of them. I mean, this book has many of his works of art in it. It's just fabulous. Right. So as you went through this, just a couple of ways to look at it maybe if we could. What surprised you the most about this process of the book? Publishing it, its reception, a story, however, an interchange. And then what delighted you the most? What was kind of something that just really blossomed in delight for you?
Well, I found out that not everybody, but the stories just kept pouring in about how people feel so fortunate to be in Pacific Grove. What a magical place it is for them. And they wrote so many stories about that. And since then, when I walk down the street, I smile at people a little bit more, and I always get a big return smile in response.
Wow.
I thought I'd put it to the test. Are the people in PG on the streets really that happy? And they are.
Yeah, we live in that kind of place.
We do, yeah. PG is so special.
Yes. And so was there a particular moment that well, I guess when you launched the book and so many people were there, and it was and the pace of the selling of the book, which is a good segue. It's really compelled you to take on another kind of next phase project in this, right?
Yeah.
So maybe talk about that a little bit.
Well, at the opening on October 7th, quite a few people came up to me and said, gosh, I had asked them for stories and they hadn't contributed them. And they were really sorry. And so after quite a few of those, I thought, well, I just had better do another sequel and get their stories in. So I committed to it right on that same day and announced it. Later, of course, I thought, what was I thinking?
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So it came organically, yeah.
It did, and there's such a magic in telling stories.
Mm-hmm.
They really bring people together. They level us all when we all see we're involved in the same life stories of getting along and earning our living and finding a mate and
what it means to live here.
And what it means to live here in this community and all the special things.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. Well, so now are you collecting those stories now, and how are you going about that if someone wanted to submit to you or that sort of thing?
Thanks for asking, King. Yes, I am collecting the stories quite in a different way than I did the first time. The first time, it was all me. I just printed up 2,000 bookmarks and collared people on the street. And friends more than once. But this time I decided to do it a little different because so many people step forward that are really good writers in Pacific Grove. Mm-hmm. And they all wanted to write more. So I'm actually not collecting that way anymore, although I've kept the website up, lifeinpacificgrove.com. And anybody who wants to write a story can go there and submit their story right on the website, or they can email them to lifeinpacificgrove@gmail.com.
Right.
So I have those two public ways set up. And then I always have that column in the Cedar Street Times.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yes, it's a weekly column for our local newspaper. Marjan Jameson does an incredible job of covering the local news, more so than the Herald or the Pinecone or any of those. A lot of really high school sports and things happening at the PG Art Center and Performing Arts Center and Coffee with a Cop and unique things to PG.
Yes.
So we have a weekly column in there. My editor-in-chief, Joyce Krieg, and I have a column called Keepers of Our Culture.
Okay.
And it's all PG stories about then and now, today or in the past. Like Keith likes to, I'm glad he does, likes to bring forth the 60s and 70s because they're not really documented, and that's important.
Yes.
So people can read our column, and somebody told me the other day, it just gets better and better.
Well, wonderful. So please do.
Yeah.
Yes, read this column.
Well, one thing we're promoting in there is the proceeds from this book all go to support our library.
Okay.
So
it all circles right back into the community.
You're right. Yeah, the funds are earmarked for the preservation and acquisition of historical documents.
So people can submit through the website.
Right.
Or
well, I'm commissioning people to write sections,
special
special sections about something that they're interested in, and it's of interest to the readers.
Fabulous.
Yeah, so Gary Carnes, for instance, who wrote the book Voices of Change about political activists, social activists in Monterey County. I published that for him a few years ago. He's writing a section on Pacific Grove activism.
Okay.
And
fabulous.
As opposed to artivism,
Activism.
activism.
It's the same. It's all the same.
It's all the same.
Yeah.
Documenting our activities.
That's wonderful.
Right, and quite a few others. And then I'm reprinting the Holman autobiography book.
Okay.
The people who published it have all died, and so I've already hired a typist to retype that.
Okay.
And gotten permission from one of the descendants that it was fine with them. They didn't own the copyright, but I didn't want to, so that'll be coming out. So I'm actually publishing the second edition of Life in Pacific Grove book with these sections.
Right.
And that'll be all launched again at Butterfly Days in the fall.
And because of what you've found, these wonderful resources of writers in the community, and then found that actually, and we've been talking about this a little bit before the show, that actually Pacific Grove has a heritage of nurturing writers, or being a place where writers like to do their work. And so there's even another vision that you're developing for Pacific Grove that's kind of already there, but you're really bringing it to life going forward. So maybe talk about that.
That's a good way to put it, King.
Yeah.
Well, most people know that John Steinbeck lived there and
Yes.
wrote a few books there.
Yes.
And Joseph Campbell lived there before he was a writer, but he was a friend of John Steinbeck's. And there's quite a number of other well-known authors from the past that have lived and written there. Jeffrey Whitmore, a local writer and editor, is compiling a story about those people. And, well, actually, he's giving that to Joyce Krieg is writing that story. But she's also canvassing the community right now to document all the writers that we have, all the places to write, like we have numerous coffee shops with Wi-Fi.
Yes.
And then there's lots of very quiet places, like at a Sillamar, any of those Julia Morgan buildings. And the garden at the Natural Museum of History.
Okay.
All the spots around, and writing supplies at well, Alpha Stationers for now, and then there's the art store there.
Yeah.
So just everything available to writers. And our long-term goal is to make Pacific Grove known as a mecca for writers and have retreats.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Central Coast Writers Group
Yes.
meets at Point Pinos Lighthouse Grill.
Yes. Yeah. Every
regularly,
month.
monthly.
Yeah, we have over 80 members in that. They're not all PG residents, but they do meet there. And Joyce is the president of the state.
Okay. Yeah, our local chapter president is also the president of the state.
She's not the president of local chapter any longer because
Okay.
she's taken on this state.
I got you.
And that's a big job. She has to go to Oakland a few times and meet with the board and things like that.
Right.
So she's a busy woman, but she does excellent editing.
But once again, it's writers being here in Pacific Grove.
Right, yeah.
In this area.
And then I'm publishing books as giving a contract and royalties to people who write books about Pacific Grove.
Okay.
So I've got 6 of those in the works already to be published.
As
next
a
October.
publisher.
Right,
Yes.
as a publisher, giving royalties.
Oh, wow.
And
That's wonderful.
it's
So can you talk about
exciting.
any of these books right now, what they'll be focusing on?
yes, well, Keith is doing a coloring book.
Okay.
So a lot of
How
people
fun.
Yeah, wanted that. And another woman who has mentally or disabled daughter, she's writing a book about how to accustom young children to being around people with disabilities.
Magnificent.
Because she has a granddaughter now, and she has noticed that little children are often afraid of people that are different.
Yes.
So she's doing a book based in Pacific Grove on experiences in Pacific Grove, how to teach young children to be accepting and not be afraid. So that's an excellent book.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And another fellow is writing a novel about Pacific Grove. And it's going to be about a couple that move independently to Pacific Grove and meet while here. And I won't give the whole plot,
Right.
but it's very interesting, a good character development, and it's showing the city.
Yes.
So in the fall then, this year, there's a national event called Indie Authors Day. Have you heard of that?
I
King?
have heard of it. Yes.
Yeah. It was started by the American Library Association 3 years ago.
Okay.
So I spoke on self-publishing at the Harrison Library in Carmel on the first year. Then last year, Joyce gave 2 seminars, one talk and a workshop at the Monterey Library. They had it the same day I was having my big launch. So this year, we're having Indie Author Day in Pacific Grove, and Joyce and I are heading that up. And there'll be authors in the garden, and it'll be at the PG Museum because the library is being renovated.
Okay.
So they'll all be authors. It's going to
Yes.
be a big deal.
Well, it sounds like it, and I just really commend you and your cohorts for, really developing a place where writers can feel at home and know that it's there and know where the resources are and find other writers, right? And you've brought some wonderful shots of Pacific Grove, and let's put some of those up on the camera right now and on the screen, and maybe just talk about for a moment as we kind of begin to turn the corner on this segment toward its close. We've got a little time left, but what Pacific Grove means to you, what these pictures are really telling about Pacific Grove.
Well, I chose these pictures as a big variety of what any writer can take advantage of when they come to Pacific Grove. There's some nice restaurants, really nice, quiet restaurants where you can actually have a conversation, not a lot of noise.
Right.
And places along the beach where you can write. And some of the amazing events, we have a lot of things you can write about. For instance, at the Museum of Natural History of Pacific Grove, there's some collections in the basement there that are unbelievable, the stories around those. And at Indie Author Day, we'll be giving private tours of those collections. Some of them from, I think, President Teddy Roosevelt donated something, and some other explorers, you know.
Some rich story material.
Very rich story material.
Yeah.
If you have an interest in artifacts from the past, and some go back, some are priceless down there from Indians and in Arizona, and it's just, it boggles the mind, really.
Yeah. Well, you know, you mentioned those benches on the seashore, and
yes.
I actually was impressed by them because as I take that route to get around Pacific Grove, I love to go down along the ocean side, and I just noticed those benches, and sometimes there will be a couple sitting there, sometimes they're just empty, sometimes there's a surfer or whatnot, and I wrote a poem about the benches, from the benches perspective. And so
great.
they have impressed me.
Well, I hope you'll submit that for book number 2, King.
Well, I'd love to because I love the poem.
Yes, great. Good.
So yes, to what Pacific Grove just naturally does to bring out. It's such a setting, right?
Right, and it's just calm and peaceful.
And it's an actual community, so there's all the depth, the complexity, the beauty of any storyteller to draw from.
Right.
So.
Yeah, yesterday, Sherry Hosworth, who is a daughter of the owner of Ace Hardware.
Okay.
She came by. She's bought about 6 or 8 books to give to people.
Okay.
So Keith is drawing a nice drawing for each person based on what their interests are.
Yeah.
I just signed my name because I leave all the room for the drawing, you know.
For his drawing.
Yeah, that's the most meaningful
but
thing.
Once again, I mean, just that Keith is doing this and you're providing these books this way to folk.
Yeah.
So, well, I'm going to hold it up one more time as we kind of wind our segment up. But this is Life in Pacific Grove, California. This one is a magnificent book with wonderful art, wonderful stories about this area. And then stay tuned for the kind of phase 2.
Book number 2.
Book number 2, as well as these other kind of full-length books that will be coming about Pacific Grove from your publishing efforts. And what is the name of your publishing company?
My company that I've been using for 30 years is called Park Place Publications.
Okay.
And I have recently taken on the imprint, which is the title of my column in the Cedar Street Times, of Keepers of Our Culture.
Wonderful. So that's how these books will be published, under the imprint of Keepers of Our Culture.
Right.
Fabulous. What a great name. And with that, I think that's a good place to wind this up. Thank you all for being here. Patricia, thank you for this wonderful conversation, and we'll just keep it going. And stay tuned, please, for our third segment with wonderful actor Keith Decker, who lives here in Carmel and is a magnificently accomplished actor. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
All right.